You're a loser. My daughter, Madison, said it so casually that for a second, I honestly thought I had misunderstood her. We were sitting at a restaurant downtown. It was supposed to be a celebration dinner for her 35th birthday. Her husband, Eric, was sitting beside her. Two of their friends were across the table. I had even paid for the dinner because Madison had called me 3 days earlier and said things were a little tight that month. That was nothing new. For years, I had been the person she called when things were tight, when the daycare bill was higher than expected, when Eric's truck needed repairs, when the kids needed new clothes, when they wanted to take a vacation but didn't have enough for the hotel. Somehow, there was always a reason, and somehow, I was always the solution. That night, the conversation turned to retirement. One of Madison's friends asked me what I planned to do now that I was 63 and working fewer hours at the accounting firm where I had spent most of my adult life. I smiled. I haven't decided yet, I said. Maybe travel a little. Maybe finally take that painting class I've been talking about. Madison laughed, not a warm laugh, the kind that makes you realize you're the joke. Painting class, she said. Mom, come on, you've been saying that for 10 years. I looked at her. She shrugged. I'm just saying. You don't really do anything. You work, go home, help us with the kids, and watch those old crime shows. Her friends went quiet. Eric looked down at his glass. Then Madison leaned back in her chair. Honestly, she said, you're kind of a loser. Everything stopped. I could hear the ice shifting inside someone's glass. I waited. I waited for Eric to say something. I waited for my daughter to laugh and say she was joking. I waited for anyone at that table to tell her she had gone too far. Nobody did. Madison just picked up her fork. That was when I understood something I should have understood years earlier. She wasn't joking. She genuinely believed it. And worse than that, she believed I would sit there and accept it. The old version of me probably would have. I might have laughed awkwardly. I might have changed the subject. I might have gone home and cried where nobody could see me. But that night, I was tired. Not angry. Not dramatic. Just tired. I placed my napkin beside my plate, stood up, picked up my purse, and walked away from the table. Mom? Madison called. I didn't answer. Behind me, I heard her say, oh my God, she's being so sensitive. That was the last thing I heard before the restaurant door closed behind me. I drove home in complete silence for the first few minutes. I kept expecting myself to cry, but I didn't. Instead, I started remembering things. Years of things. The first time Madison asked me to co-sign a loan, the weekend I spent watching her children while she and Eric went to a resort, the car repair I paid for, the rent payment I quietly covered when Eric lost his job, the credit card bill she promised to repay, the school fees, the emergency babysitting, the groceries, the furniture I had bought when they moved into their first house. Every time, I told myself the same thing. She's my daughter. That's what mothers do. But sitting alone in my kitchen that night, I finally asked myself a question I had avoided for years. What exactly had Madison ever done for me? The answer made me uncomfortable, because it was almost nothing. My phone buzzed. It was Madison. I expected an apology. Instead, her message said, Mom, don't forget to transfer the money for Olivia's daycare tomorrow. It comes out automatically. I stared at the screen. Not, are you okay? Not, I'm sorry. Not even, did you get home safely? Just another reminder. Another bill. Another assumption. For several seconds, my finger hovered over the screen. Then I typed, you'll need to handle it yourself. Her reply came almost immediately. What? I turned off my phone, and for the first time in years, I went to bed without solving Madison's problem. The next morning, I woke up to 12 missed calls. I made coffee, opened the curtains, and ignored every single one. At 9:30, I finally checked my messages. Madison had gone from confused to furious. Mom, this isn't funny. Then, The payment didn't go through. Then, call me right now. And finally, you can't just decide not to help me. I read that last message twice. You can't just decide. That was when something inside me became very clear. She thought my help belonged to her. Not because she had earned it, not because we had agreed to it, but because I had done it for so long. So I called her. She answered immediately. What is wrong with you? She snapped. Good morning, Madison. Don't do that. The daycare called me. They're charging us a late fee. I'm sorry to hear that. Silence. Then she said, Are you seriously doing this because of what I said last night? I looked out the window. Yes. Oh my God. She actually laughed. Mom, I said you were boring. I didn't kill anyone. You called me a loser because you act like one sometimes. I closed my eyes, and somehow that hurt less than the first insult. Maybe because now I knew exactly who I was dealing with. I'm not discussing this anymore, I said. Fine, but I need the daycare money. No, another silence. Then her voice changed. You're my mother. Yes. So act like it. I smiled. Not because it was funny, because I finally understood. For Madison, being her mother meant being permanently available, permanently useful, permanently responsible. But apparently, it did not mean deserving respect. I have acted like your mother for 35 years, I said quietly. Starting today, you can start acting like an adult. Then I hung up. I expected guilt. Instead, I felt something much stranger. Relief. Over the next few weeks, Madison discovered how many small things I had been quietly handling. I had paid for the family phone plan. So I removed her number. I had been paying for the children's emergency savings account. I stopped contributing. I had been the person she called whenever she needed someone to pick up the kids. I started saying no. The first time she heard it, she was shocked. Mom, I have an appointment. I'm busy. Doing what? I almost laughed. As if I needed permission to have a life. I have plans. With who? That isn't your concern. She went silent, and then she said something that changed the way I saw everything. You never used to be like this. She was right. I hadn't. The old me would cancel my plans. The old me would rearrange my schedule. The old me would apologize for having a life, but that woman had left the restaurant the night Madison called her a loser. 3 weeks later, my younger brother Daniel came to visit. He found me sitting in my backyard with a stack of brochures. What's all this? He asked. Painting classes. He smiled. You're finally doing it. I think so. Daniel sat beside me for a while. Neither of us said anything. Then he asked about Madison. So I told him everything. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he looked at me and said, Linda, can I tell you something without you getting mad? Probably. You've spent your whole life making sure Madison never had to struggle. I looked down at my coffee. And now she thinks struggling is something other people are supposed to prevent for her. That stayed with me. Not because I wanted to blame myself, but because I realized something painful every time I rescued Madison from the consequences of her decisions. I had convinced myself I was helping her. Maybe I was actually teaching her that someone else would always clean up the mess. And now that someone else had finally stopped, she was furious. But the real surprise came 2 months later. Madison showed up at my house with Eric. They were both unusually polite. That alone should have warned me. Eric complimented my garden. Madison brought pastries. They sat at my kitchen table, smiling at each other. Then Madison finally said, So, we've been thinking. I waited. Our lease is ending soon, she said. I nodded. And rent is ridiculous right now. I nodded. Again, Eric leaned forward. We thought maybe we could move in here for a while. For a moment, I honestly thought I had heard him wrong. Madison smiled. Just temporarily. Until we save enough money. I looked around my house. The house I had worked 30 years to pay off, the house where I had finally begun enjoying my own company. My painting supplies were now set up in the spare bedroom. I had started going to a book club. I had even booked a trip to Maine with 2 women from my painting class. For the first time in my life, my house felt like mine, and Madison wanted to move her family into it. I took a sip of water. No, her smile disappeared. What? No, Mom. Don't be ridiculous. I'm not. You have 3 bedrooms, I know. The kids could stay in the guest room. No, Madison looked at Eric, then back at me. So, you'd rather let your own daughter struggle than help her? I thought about that, then I said, you don't want help. You want access. Her face changed. What does that even mean? It means you don't need me to solve your life. She stood up. You're unbelievable. No, I said calmly. I'm just different now. She left without saying goodbye. But something about that conversation bothered me. Not because I felt guilty, because Madison had seemed strangely confident, like she believed she still had another option. A few days later, Daniel called me. You might want to know something, he said. What? Madison called me. My stomach tightened. What did she want? She asked if you were planning to sell your house. I sat up. What did you tell her? The truth, that I had no idea. Then he paused. Why? I looked around my living room. For months, I had been thinking about it. The stairs were becoming harder on my knees. The yard was beautiful, but exhausting. And after my husband died, I had stayed in that big house mostly because I thought one day Madison and her family might need it. But now, that reason no longer existed. That evening, I called a real estate agent. Not because I wanted revenge. Not because I wanted to punish Madison. I wanted freedom. 2 months later, my house was listed. I didn't tell Madison, not because it was a secret, because it wasn't her decision. Then, something almost unbelievable happened. The house received an offer within a week, and while the paperwork moved forward, I quietly bought a small townhouse near the lake, 2 bedrooms. No basement. No extra storage. No room for an entire family to temporarily move in. It was perfect. I signed the papers on a Friday, and on Saturday morning, Madison showed up. She walked through my front door without knocking. Mom, we need to talk. Then she stopped. The living room was almost empty. Boxes were stacked near the stairs. My old family photographs had been taken off the walls. Her face slowly changed. What's going on? I walked out of the kitchen holding a roll of packing tape. I'm moving. She stared at me. What? I sold the house. For a few seconds, she said nothing. Then she laughed nervously. You're joking. No, where are you going? I bought a townhouse. She looked toward the hallway. What about us? I tilted my head. What about you? Mom! Her voice cracked. You knew our lease was ending. Yes. And you sold your house? Yes. Without telling me? Yes. Her face turned red. We were supposed to move in here. No, I said. You wanted to move in here. You knew we needed somewhere to go. And you knew I needed respect. That stopped her. Eric walked in behind her. He looked from me to Madison, then at the boxes. You actually sold it? He asked. Yes. Madison turned toward me. So what are we supposed to do now? And that was the moment I had waited months for. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because for the first time, she was asking herself a question she should have been asking all along. What do we do? Not, what will Mom do? What will Mom pay? What will Mom fix? What will Mom sacrifice? I looked at my daughter. You'll figure it out. She stared at me like I had betrayed her. You're abandoning me. No, my voice was calm. I'm just no longer abandoning myself. For once, Madison had no answer. I picked up another box. Then I said, I hope you find a place you love. And I went back to packing. It has been almost a year since I moved. My townhouse is small, bright and peaceful. Every morning, I drink coffee on my little patio. I take painting classes twice a week. Last month, One of my paintings was displayed at a local community exhibition. Nothing huge, but when I stood there looking at it on the wall, I remembered what Madison had said. "You're a loser." For years, I probably would have believed that success meant being needed by everyone. Now I know better. Being constantly needed is not the same thing as being valued. Madison and Eric eventually found a smaller apartment. They had to sell one of their cars. They changed the kids' daycare. They learned how to budget. From what Daniel tells me, life became harder for them, but not impossible. And maybe that was the point. I had never actually been responsible for making Madison's life easy. I was responsible for loving her. Those were two very different things. Madison and I still speak. Occasionally, our relationship isn't the same. Maybe it never will be. She apologized once. Not a dramatic apology. Not the kind you see in movies. Just a quiet phone call where she finally said, "I didn't realize how much you did for us." I was silent for a moment. Then I said, "I didn't realize how much I was giving up either." We still have boundaries. And honestly, I like them. Because love without boundaries eventually becomes something else. Resentment, exhaustion, entitlement. I don't hate my daughter. I never stopped loving her. But I finally learned that loving someone does not mean allowing them to use you, and if refusing to sacrifice my peace makes me a loser in her eyes, then I'm perfectly fine losing, because for the first time in a very long time, I finally feel like I've won.